The rain hit me like a slap, harsh and sharp, the second that door banged shut. I stood there on the porch, my shirt adhering to my skin, my hair dripping into my eyes, waiting for the punchline. Kira, my wife, had been laughing so hard her face grew scarlet, her voice echoing with Jenna, Bria, and Tasha as they pushed me out. "Let's see how long he can survive in the cold," she'd said, like it was some great game. I could still hear them giggling through the wood, their sounds muted yet alive, while I stood there, stunned, thinking they'd open it back up any second. It was intended to be humorous, they stated, a prank, something to tell at parties later. But then, the lights flicked off inside. The blinds snapped shut one by one, like eyes closing on me. I banged on the door, my knuckles burning from the wet wood, yelling, "Kira, come on, let me in!" Nothing. Simply the sound of rain pounding the ground and my own breathing, heavy and quick. I waited. Minutes turned into an hour. My teeth chattered, my fingers grew numb, and still no one came. I kept visualizing her face, those bright green eyes, that smirk she'd get when she knew she'd won. I thought maybe she'd crack, feel guilty, push the door open with a false apology and a towel, yet the house stayed dark. Silence, dead. Hours passed, and my legs shook so severely I could barely stand. I didn't have my phone, my money, nothing but the garments soaking through to my bones. Gazed at that door one last time, the one I'd painted blue for her last summer, and something in me simply broke. Not loud, not with a scream, but quiet, like a rope snapping inside. I turned around, stepped off the porch, and started walking. The rain swept me up, and I didn't glance back. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I wasn't returning. Not to that house, not to that laugh, not to her. It wasn't funny anymore. It never was. My boots squelched in the mud, and every step felt heavier, like the universe was trying to pull me down. Yet I kept moving. The streetlights flickered, producing long shadows that spread out like they were chasing me. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what came next. All I felt was this anguish, this raw, jagged thing in my chest, telling me I'd been a fool to think she'd ever cared. I walked past our neighbor's house, the one with the yappy dog that constantly growled at me. But even he was quiet tonight. Maybe he knew. Maybe he saw it coming. I didn't stop to think about what I'd left behind, my keys, my work, my whole damn life. None of it mattered. The rain kept pouring, and I kept walking, my hands tucked deep in my pockets, my head down against the wind. I don't know how long I walked before the cold started to feel normal, like it was part of me now. I passed a petrol station. The clerk inside stared at me through the window, like I was some ghost drifting by. Maybe I was. I didn't stop. I didn't ask for help. I just kept moving, one foot in front of the other, until the town I'd known for 10 years started to disappear behind me. That night, out there in the dark, I wasn't Reed anymore. Not the guy who fixed the sink, not the guy who paid the bills, not the guy who laughed at Kira's silly jokes. I was just a man, walking away, leaving everything I'd built to rot behind that slammed door, and somehow, that felt good. The rain poured down harder, hitting me like 1,000 tiny fists, cold and relentless. But I didn't stop, I didn't look back, and I never would. She asked, her voice sharp enough to break glass. I nodded. He added, "You might need help." She snorted, tossing me a towel with a fading name badge that said, "Jim, dishwasher, quit yesterday night, snatched a bottle of whiskey on his way out. You steal, you're dead. Start now." I didn't argue. Didn't have the energy to. She pointed me toward the rear, a tight kitchen with a sink stacked high with greasy plates and coffee mugs. I got to work, rolling up my sleeves and thrusting my hands into the steaming water. The heat burned at first, but it felt amazing, like it was scraping away the numbness that had settled over me since that night. I scrubbed hard, the clatter of dishes drowning out the cacophony in my mind. I didn't think about Kira. Not her laugh, not the way she locked me out, not the pals who'd egged her on. I focused on the dishes, the way the soap flowed off them, the rhythm of rinse, stack, repeat. Hours passed. My fingers wrinkled like prunes, my back throbbed from standing over the sink. Dolores popped her head in once, grumbling when she saw the mound shrinking. "Not bad," she murmured, then disappeared back to the front. It wasn't much, but it felt like something. A little slit of light in the dark I'd been going through. The diner was loud, servers screaming orders, the sizzling of bacon on the griddle, truckers laughing over their eggs. I stayed quiet, kept my head down, let the noise wash over me like it could clear up the mess within. By the end of the shift, my arms were sore, my shirt soaked with sweat, but my hands were steady. Dolores slid a plate across the counter when I was done. Charred bread, a fried egg, a chunk of bacon that looked like it had seen better days. "Eat," she said, not looking at me. I sat on a stool in the corner, the food warm in my stomach, and it hit me. This was the first meal I'd had, in days that wasn't cold or handed out in a line. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned with my own hands. I chewed slowly, feeling the sear on the bread, the salt of the bacon, letting it settle me. The diner emptied out as the sun fell low, leaving just the hum of the fridge and the clink of Dolores counting the register. I went back to the sink, tackling the last few pans, the hot water boiling up around me. I thought about the next shift, the next dish, each dollar I'd put away. It wasn't a life yet, just a start, a weak little footing on a difficult climb. But it was something. I'd walked away from Kira, from that house, from everything I'd known, and now here I was, elbow deep in dishwater, making something new. The anguish was still there, dull and heavy. Yet it didn't own me anymore. I rinsed a skillet, watching the oil swirl down the drain, and promised myself I'd keep going. One dish, one day at a time. After I finished, Dolores gave me a couple of bucks from the till. "Come back tomorrow," she said. I nodded as I stepped outside into the chilly night. The stars shone above me. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running. I was standing, right where I needed to be. The diner became my universe. Greasy dishes, scorched coffee, the hum of the exhaust fan over the grill. I'd been there a couple of weeks, saving every penny Dolores handed my way, enough to get out. Out of the shelter and into a cheap room above a barber shop down the street. It wasn't much, just a sagging bed, a wobbling table, and a window that rattled when the wind blew. But it was mine. I got a vintage coat from a thrift store, thick enough to keep the frost off, and a little flip phone from the gas station, the kind that barely held a charge. I didn't give the number to anyone. Didn't call anyone either. Kira didn't know where I was, and I wanted it that way. I'd started using the name Reed again, not hiding it like I did that first night at the shelter. But I kept everything else locked up tight. No one at the diner asked questions. Dolores didn't care, and the waiters were too busy flirting with truckers for tips to bother with me. I enjoyed it that way, the quiet wrapping around me like a shield. I didn't talk about the past. Didn't let it sneak in when I scrubbed pots or cleaned the floor. But one night, after a hard shift, I messed up. I was sitting on my bed, the room dark, but for the glow of that cheap phone, and my thumb hovered over the screen. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was sleepy. Maybe I was weak. But I typed her name into the search box. Kira's social media popped up, her profile picture, the same grin I used to think was attractive. My heart stopped, a cold jolt shooting through me as I scrolled. She'd been writing, small poetry, all flowery, sorrowful. He walked off into the storm and never came back. The words dripped with shame, twisted into something else. Another lost in the rain. A piece of me gone. Her friends were there too. Jenna and Bria posting notes like, "We miss him," and hope, "He's okay," acting like they hadn't laughed while I stood outside in the cold. My stomach turned.